Hey everybody, I'm comedian Maz Jobrani, and today I am the man of the hour. But don't worry, it's not an hour long. It's like a half an hour long. So I am the man of a half an hour.
Our next guest redefines what it means to build an extraordinary career in providing a sense of education and community through the art of comedy. Maz Jobrani is with me now to dive a little deeper into his life as an immigrant and what he believes could be the very thing that brings us all closer together. Maz Jobrani, there is so much that I want to cover with you in just such a short amount of time, but I want to ask you a simple question on the front end of this incredible interview. I can't wait to dive in with you. How are you doing?
Well, I'm doing all right. It's been a crazy year for everybody, but we keep moving forward. We human beings find ways to move forward. So me as a touring comedian,
Mm.
my you know lifestyle has been turned upside down because there's nowhere to tour. I mean, there's a handful of states right now that are doing some comedy shows,
Mm.
but for the most part it's not what it was. It used to be all over the world. You'd go do, the idea was to pack people together. Now the idea is to keep people apart.
Part.
So my life is turned upside down in many ways, but the silver linings are that I'm home with the family. I've got a 12-year-old son, 9-year-old daughter. We just got a puppy. So my wife is home working. It's funny because I have my wife working on her computer. Each kid has their own computer. They're Zooming. I got
Yeah.
my stuff. I say we used to be like a family. Now when you walk into our living room, it's like an internet incubator startup. Like there's someone in every corner typing away. I'm like, did you get the VC funding? Are we going? Are we a go or not? So that's been our lives. And my life has come on to digital, right? So I'm doing my podcast. I'm doing stand up on Zoom.
Mm.
It's been an interesting year.
Oh my gosh, Maz. Well, I want to get to your podcast a little later in this podcast, but when it comes to touring online, what has that been like? I mean, are you doing shows virtually through Zoom and then just allowing a ton of attendance into the same call?
Yeah, it's been an interesting thing there too. At first, I was hesitant to do Zoom shows because stand-up comedy, you need a live audience. You need to
Yep.
work off of them. But then I did a couple shows for charity, and they actually ended up being pretty good because what we do is we unmute about 10 people so you can hear their laughter, and then everybody else is just watching in their homes. And it's funny because you get to see them in their homes. You see somebody's on a couch with their family, someone's in their bed in pajamas, somebody was like smoking a cigarette at one time. I'm like, what's going on here? And then what's funny is then you unmute those 10 people so you can hear them, and some of them don't understand the protocol. So
Mm.
you'll all of a sudden you hear somebody talking back to you saying like, oh yeah, I thought of the same thing. And then you get someone in the Zoom chat writing like, tell Karen to shut up. I'm like, Karen, they're telling you to shut up.
It would
So
be
it,
Karen too.
it is Karen, right? So it's got its own charm. So it's actually been pretty fun to do.
Yeah.
I also did a drive-in show where it was at the Irvine Improv, and you go, they broadcast you on a big screen. You're on stage. There's a screen back here, and people are in their cars. And that was weird because they're listening to you on their radio station, and the only laughter you're hearing is there's a group of cars in the front row where they have trucks, so they're on their beds, the truck bed, listening.
Yeah.
And that was like a weird thing because I you can't really hear it, you can't get the rhythm. So that one was a tough one to do. Yeah.
You got to do what you got to do. Like you just said, there's no better way right now than to just figure out how to do things. I mean, you mentioned a little bit ago to me that now that you're accessible at home, when your kids and your wife aren't on their computers, they're asking you to do everything around the house too. And it's like, how many jobs can you take on in 2020? That's pretty much the struggle everybody's going through.
Dude, first of all, let me tell you something. Thank God for YouTube because you can learn anything you want to do. You go on YouTube, there's a little tutorial. So I've done all kinds of stuff. Like my daughter had a blanket. She's held on to her, like her baby blanket. So she and my wife went and bought a new blanket.
Mm.
And my daughter goes, hey, mommy said I should ask you if you could sew the blankets together. Sure. So I sewed the blankets together, a little tutorial. Here I go. I have we had a mouse loose in our house. I caught the mouse.
Mm.
I just did some electrical work, which I was a little worried about because I was just hoping I turned off the right fuse to do the work. Although now it's not working, so I got to go see what's going on. And then anything computer related, I'm the guy. I'm tech support. I'm handyman. I wash the dishes, and I just took the puppy on her first walk around the block. So, who's your daddy?
That's what. Who is your daddy for the baby
Right?
puppy? I mean, you mentioned you
Right?
guys just got a dog. You might as well. And now she's only going to be trying to hang out with you. She's not going to care about the kids and the wife. She's just going to be like, Maz, take me out, daddy. Right?
I'm telling you,
Maz,
man.
feed me, daddy.
Well, I'm learning. We're not dog people. That's a whole other, the whole idea of like alpha. You got to get it. You got to let them know.
You got to bite the dog on
it.
the ear like they did in Snow Dogs. Do you remember that movie?
Oh yeah. Bite that dog. Yeah, no, I'm all right. I don't need no biting. I got my little shocker. I just no.
Oh my God! I was gonna say, are you shocking your dog? I hope
I'm
not.
kidding. No, I was at Petco and there was a little sign that said like, "Do not shock train your dogs." I was like, "Who's shock training their dogs?" I don't know.
See, those are the dogs that needed help before they were owned by the people. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. That's like the Guantanamo Bay training. It's like waterboard your dog.
Yeah.
Like that's some cruel shit, dude.
Well, I used to tell my dad, I said, well, I kind of want a dog because sometimes I look at dogs, I'm thinking, damn, you're better than a lot of humans that I know. And they're pretty smart animals, but you just got to get lucky with them if you make them a pet.
Listen, I think the thing you learn early is you got to train them. And the other thing I was telling my wife, because our kids now are getting to that age where they're no longer little kids, where they count on us for everything.
Sure.
So as a parent, there's a sense of loss because you're going, wow, this kid counted on me to eat. This kid counted on me to pick him up, pick her up, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So I was telling my wife, I go, that's why people love their dogs, because dogs are going to count on you and be with you their whole lives. There's no like, oh, I'm going off to college, mom. None of that crap. It's like, you're my boy.
Right. Well, it's a dog is a man's best friend. And I think you might have found yours. Just don't tase it. Okay. Promise me you won't tase your dog. You'll just feed it and walk it.
Yeah. No tasing. No tasing.
Maz, I mentioned at the top of this podcast that I have admired you for a long time. You've done an incredible amount of work for social impact throughout the entirety of your career. You've certainly made a mark in entertainment, whether be it television, be it comedy. But something I wanted to ask you today at the top of our interview was, you've really exemplified what it meant to take the art of comedy and not only make people laugh their ass off, but to really start setting an example for what it means to educate people while making them laugh. And so when did you really discover that's what you kind of saw as what I call a superpower of yours? But if you didn't consider it a superpower, when did you really start thinking, I can make people laugh, but also educate them in some sense, especially since you've been covering a lot of politics and immigration and, comedic relief around a lot of the things that have been happening?
Well, when you say superpower, I'm reminded of Donald Trump after the coronavirus, where he's like, I feel like superpowers. It's like, because you're on steroids, dude. I think early on, first of all, I got influenced. My stand-up comedy hero, probably like a lot of guys from my age group, like your Gabriel Iglesias, Joe Coy, Sebastian Maniscalco, Sam Tripoli, all those. You talk to any of those guys, Brett Ernst, a lot of us, we say Eddie Murphy was our comedy influence. Paul Vierzy, my man. So all these guys, when you talk about Eddie Murphy, Raw, Eddie Murphy, Delirious, Eddie Murphy before those, he had Comedian. And if you watch Eddie Murphy, it's all, pretty silly. It's not political at all. However, once I got into it, I started realizing, first of all, as an Iranian American, as an immigrant, I thought, oh, well, let me talk about my story. And so my story is one that is, we've had times in this country since I came here when I was 6 years old. We've had times when Iran was the enemy, they continue to be the enemy. And Americans weren't able to distinguish between the government of Iran and the Iranian people who came to America. So when I hear about, Chinese or Asians feeling like they're being targeted because the administration is calling it the China virus, or when I hear that, Mexicans are feeling targeted, Trump says, they're rapists and whatever. I understand that because I go, hey, I lived through something like that where because the government that we left, my family left Iran because of that government, and we didn't agree with them, the Islamic Republic. We don't agree with them. But we come here, and then they take Americans hostage, and then all of a sudden, Iranians are getting beaten up. And back then they used to call you fucking Iranian. They would beat you up. I didn't get beaten up, but I know of people who did. And so all of that, you go, wow, okay, so this stuff's kind of continued. And if you watch, the political game plan a lot is fear. Put fear in people, right? In 2016, they were saying, Trump was saying, Muslims and Mexicans are coming to get you. In 2018, he says there's a caravan coming to get you. In 2020, Black people are coming to get you. Black Lives Matter. So you see all this, and as someone who's watching it from the outside, you go, wow, this is so obviously hypocritical and so obviously a political maneuver to try to fool people to think a certain way. So you go, wow, if I can talk about this with punchlines and make people think a little bit, why not? And so then you go back and you look at other comedians that you watched that were heroes, and you got your Richard Pryors, you got your George Carlins, you got Jon Stewart with The Daily Show, now Trevor Noah. I watch Colbert. I love if somebody can do comedy or music with a message. You look at Marvin Gaye's later music, a lot of it was, Mercy, Mercy Me is all, things ain't what they used to be, all that stuff, right? All that stuff. Hanging all the head, make me want to holler the way they do my life. That's Marvin Gaye, right? Stevie Wonder, like a lot of these guys, Public Enemy, Rage Against the Machine. When I hear a piece of art and I go, oh, wait a minute, they're saying something underneath it, I go, whoa, man, that just blew me away. So I strive for that. But in the middle of it, by the way, I don't mind doing some fart jokes either.
I was going to say, oh my gosh, I remember watching a comedy bit with you on stage mentioning that people greet each other different ways, which we'll get to a little later in this episode about the idea of cultural identity and how people can really learn a lot from meeting people from around the world and learning about their cultures, how they live their lives, how they do things. But I remember you mentioning that arigato. So I'm half Japanese, which I was going to allude to in just a second.
There you go.
When we do greet each other, there's the idea that we have to bow with one another. And that's one example of how Japanese people greet each other. And they're very attentive to making sure the person that they're talking to feels special and feels heard and listened to and understood on the front end. So I mean, right? And I remember that, and you're like, the guy like popped his back out after bowing so much.
Yeah.
But it's like, can you make a joke out of that? But you've done exactly that. And to your point about how nowadays, be it music or comedy, I think a lot of us are really trying to find how we can drive social impact through the art of entertainment, period. Because I think the world has needed it for so long. It's the reason we started this podcast. I know it's the reason you started your podcast, Back to School, with Maz Jobrani. You bring on experts and people from all walks of life to really educate all walks of life, and that's something I think we need.
First of all, I'm interested in all that stuff. I love reading books. I love reading, I listen to Terry Gross, all things, Fresh Air on NPR, and the interviews that she does, or Howard Stern interviews. And I'll listen to somebody and go, wow, this person is so interesting. Mark Maron, I love WTF, the podcast. Why? Because you're learning about people and their journeys. So on my podcast, I had a lady. She was a cave diver. Like she goes underneath glaciers. I mean, how do you that thought of someone doing that is amazing. And I heard her on Terry Gross, and I reached out. She came on mine, right? And then there's a guy named Firuz Naderi who was working for the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, JPL. For NASA. He helped land the rover on Mars. And he tells a story. He goes, listen, it took us 4 years to get that thing to get there. And the last 8 minutes when the rover lands, we lose contact. So we saw rover get into the atmosphere, but we didn't know if it had landed. And he goes, we were all on pins and needles for 8 minutes. And he goes, that's how long it takes the signal to come to Earth. And he goes, once the mission controller, whoever says rover landed, he goes, we all started crying because that was 4 years of our work and it was successful, you know?
Yeah.
So many interesting people out there. And I think what happens is, and maybe part of it is the environment we're in, you know, people, first of all, people just read a headline and then move on, right? They
Sure.
don't want that. They don't give themselves a chance to go deeper and go, what's going on here? We're divided in many ways. We're looking for the enemy, right? To one side, the enemy are the fascists. The other side, the enemy are communists. Everyone's going at each other and not stepping back and go, wait a minute, we have a similar goal here. Our
Hmm.
goal is for people to be able to prosper in this country. Our goal is to deal with the homeless situation. Our goal is to get through coronavirus, all this stuff, right? So I think comedy sometimes can be a way to get people to be a little more open to things that they might have been closed to. So if
Hmm.
you get people in a room and they all laugh with each other, it's a step in the right direction. And I feel that once you get past it all, like if you look at a guy like Richard Pryor, if you look at a guy like Dave Chappelle, what they were able to do was their comedy transcends race. They've got a lot of
Yep.
fans that are white fans, and they got Asian fans, and they got whatever. So funny's funny. It's
Right.
just that sometimes people aren't open to it because they've categorized you, right? So
Yeah.
somebody might sit there and be like, oh, you're the Iranian comedian. I'm like, no, I'm a comedian that happens to be Iranian. And I go, by the way, come to the show, watch the show. And I bet you 8 out of 10 people that come to the show will find things that they will find funny. Now,
Hmm.
maybe 20% might say, not my cup of tea. I like edgier stuff. I like this. I like that. That's fine. But for the most part, I'm going to talk about experience with kids. I'm going to talk about experience under coronavirus. And then I might get into politics. And even if you don't like my politics, it's like, if it's funny, let's admit it's funny, right? If I do a joke about Donald Trump is bad for comedy because he says so much crazy shit, we can't keep up with him,
Hmm.
right? The joke comes from the idea that stand-up comedians take a year to build their set, and then they go out and they record it, and then they make it a special.
Right.
Well, if every time I come up with a new Trump joke, he said
He's
something crazier the next day, I can't keep up. So
right.
I need a daily show to keep up with this guy. So now, whether you like him or not, you have to admit that there's
Yeah.
truth to that.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I try as much as I can. I'll quote D.L. Hughley here on my
Oh
long
yeah.
answer to you. I was on a panel with him. He's another one that's a good political comedian. He said comedy is like giving people their medicine, but in orange juice so they don't taste it. So that's what we're trying to
Shoo.
do.
Man. And all the great work you've done because that was your goal the whole time. When you look back at the 6-year-old, Maz that came to the United States as an immigrant and where you kind of saw your career going, I want to ask you that too. There's this idea of the American dream that I think we're all pretty much aware of, but are still trying to discover what it means for our personal lives. So when you think back to the 6-year-old that first moved to the United States, how you then got into your career, be it startup its stand-up comedy and then kind of build everything that you've done off of that. What do you feel like you really took out of creating an American dream for yourself and your family and everybody that you've been in touch with?
Well, let me say this. First of all, put the American dream aside. In life, in general, now you have Japanese, and a lot of times immigrant parents, and perhaps even non-immigrant parents of the previous generations, had an idea of what they wanted their kids to do. They said, we
Mm,
want you to be a lawyer, doctor, engineer. And they kind of tried to put you in a box. And you might have been a cartoonist. And
sure.
your parent would be like, no, you need to be a doctor. And you're like, but I love cartooning. What are you going to do with cartooning? Stop
Mm,
talking about this crazy stuff. Get over there and go to medical school. Similarly, my parents, you got to do something professional. So I went
yep.
down that path of possibly becoming a lawyer. Quickly realized I don't want to do it. Back and forth, back and forth. Took me till my mid-20s to realize you live once. So do what you love doing. If A, you're lucky enough to know what that is, and B, you're lucky enough to be in a place where that opportunity exists. Because you don't know how many messages I get from young people in Iran or in other countries where there's an oppressive regime or there's
Mm,
lack of opportunity, there's economic lack of opportunity. They're hitting me up going, I want to be an actor. What can I do? And I go, I don't know what you can do. I have no idea. But in America, you can say, I want to be an actor. Go to the local town, the
Get a
playhouse and do a
headshot and
play.
go into casting. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Go. I mean, you can do it. So overall, I would say what's sold as an American dream, but can be a world life dream. If you have a passion, go for it. Because for me, when I decided to do that, that's when I found like that was my American dream. The fact that I could do it. Like I used to say, kind of like this idea I had about, you know, me versus my parents. If I said to my parents, my dream is to be a comedian,
Yep.
and my mom would say like, my dream is for you to be a doctor. So the previous generations, you have to live for those people's dreams, and we still
Sure.
have that in a lot of cultures, right?
Oh yeah.
Japanese culture, I'm sure, is the same. Indians, whatever. But my American dream was the moment I said I'm going to do this in my mid 20s. I decided to do this, and at that point, I felt like that's my American dream. Now, there's been all kinds of icing on the cake
Cake.
along the way,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I got a chance to perform at the White House under the Obama administration. That was like unbelievable. That was not a career highlight. That was a life highlight. Um, I got a chance to give the commencement speech at UC Berkeley in front of 45,000 people in 2017. Another lifetime dream that I sat there and I go, this kid who came from Iran at the age of 6 had no idea he could be standing in front of 45,000 people, cracking jokes and then giving them advice on their lives.
Yeah.
So now, how did that happen? Because I was lucky enough to find what I love doing, and then the world just kind of came together. And that's why, again, I still do believe in this idea that America is a place where you can find those opportunities. And I think we should share those opportunities with asylum seekers and refugees and other people who are just as driven as some kid who comes from a family of, a wealthy family and has everything handed to them. These other people might have the same drive. So why not encourage them as well? So that's it.
And this is the territory where I even knew coming here when I was going through high school and then I was about to enroll in university in Tennessee. I had thought to myself, if I'm going to go from Japan to the United States, what do I want out of a career? I'm in my mid 20s now. I'm 24, and I can't help but think that when you were 24, and having those aha moments, you just got to start activating. And you just have to start figuring out what's going to make the most sense for you. But now, fast forward to where you are now, I love that you bring up the idea that there are going to be many people who have just as much of an ambition to pursue what they want to pursue in this country, or who haven't yet landed in the territory of the United States, and then to pursue what they want to. And it all comes down, what are your thoughts when it comes down to this idea that it is more about talent, skill set, drive, hard work, ambition, kindness, more so than it is where you've come from and the background you might have with your rich family and what have you?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it starts with, success in your life or your career starts with, we're all wired differently, right? Malcolm Gladwell has this 10,000 hour rule, right? You put
Yeah.
10,000 hours into something, you're going to be good at it. Well, I could play 10,000 hours of basketball. I will never make the NBA. So one thing is genetics. You're wired a specific way, right? So for whatever reason, I was wired to stand in front of an audience. And early on as a kid in junior high school and in high school and stuff, I would do plays. And I was uninhibited. I didn't feel like, oh, I'm being watched. I felt alive. And so I had a lot of teachers and directors back then in high school, junior high school, say, you can do this professionally. And I would tell my immigrant parents, yeah, they're saying I should do this. And my dad would be like, that bitch is crazy. They'd be like, do not listen to her. So again, I didn't have that support, but I was wired for this. Now you come to Hollywood and you realize, oh, there's thousands and thousands of people that are wired for this. This is the all-star league, right? I mean, it's like between Hollywood and New York, you're competing with the best of the best. These guys were all wired for it. So now what differentiates us? Well, the next thing that's going to differentiate you is your work ethic. There's a ton of people I started out with who just gave up, and they were probably more talented than I was, but they didn't want to hang out. Now, for me, there's other things I tried in my career, were encouraged by my family to try business, try this, try that. But as soon as I was rejected in those careers or in those jobs, I would be like, I don't want to try again. Right? I don't want to knock on that door again. I don't want to make that call again. I was rejected. I don't feel it. Stand up, I would get rejected and I'd be like, that's fine. So what we would do is early on, like I started stand-up comedy in 1998, became a regular at the Comedy Store in Los Angeles in 1999. And Comedy Store, as well as the Laugh Factory back then, was set up in a way where you're scheduled to be on it. Let's say, first of all, they don't give you the 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock spot out the gate. They're going to give you the midnight spot in front of 5 people. But even that, you're showing up to do your 15 minutes in front of 5 people at midnight. And all of a sudden, back then, Andrew Dice Clay, Eddie Griffin, Paul Mooney, there was all these guys who were established at that point. Carlos Mencia. These guys would show up and they'd say, I feel like going up. And then they go up and they do an hour or more. And you'd have to sit there and wait. Now, I remember waiting those times and I had no problem. It was like a sense of pride to be able to wait that hour, hour and a half, and then get up with like at 1:45. I got on stage at 1:45 when the club was going to close at 2. I was the last guy up.
15 minutes.
15 minutes. Yeah. And I've gotten up in front of one person before where I waited. Finally, one person. And it turns out as I'm doing my show, that one person was this guy, Johnny Zapp, who used to hang out at the club. He was kind of like the club's drunk. He'd just hang out and, watch all night. So at one point I was doing it and I didn't realize because the room was dark. So I didn't see who the one audience member was, but I'm performing for one person. Yeah. And he starts yelling out suggestions on like tags for my jokes. And I go, is that Johnny? And he's like, yeah. I go, why am I up here? I can just be talking to you. So I found that passion of mine and I was able to go through it. So similarly, you are wired a specific way. You've got the passion, if you've got the grit, all that stuff. Those are the things. It doesn't matter if you come from privilege, doesn't matter if you come from nothing, in this world of comedy, in this world that I'm in, you hear of a lot of stories. Jim Carrey, his father, I think, was a janitor or something. Yep. You hear a lot of stories of people like living in their cars. Supposedly Chris Tucker, I think, lived in his car. Tiffany Haddish tells stories of being, living in her car. So what you have in terms of means is not important. It's what you have in your heart. And end of the day, you also hit another thing, which is be good. I mean, it's like, I don't care what you do.
Sure.
But you better be good. Because I think the other thing that happens is a lot of people believe their own hype. So all of a sudden,
it's that ego.
The ego gets in and they go, I don't want to participate in that charity because who needs that? You know who I am? I don't want to. It's like, no, man, just take what you have and help.
Because one day you may not end up with anything. And you're going to look back at all the things that you might have dissed. You never know.
Not even that. It's like, what is it about? Like, how many Academy Awards can you put behind you and go, I won 10 Academy Awards. Good for you. Meanwhile, you go and you participate in an event. Like I've done fundraisers where they raise, $500,000, $1 million, whatever it is, for different people in need, children with cancer. And you walk out that night and you go, oh my God, or you have somebody come up to you at a show and say something along the lines of, hey, I was sick in the hospital and your comedy really helped me get through it. And it's just like, that makes me feel like, oh, wow, this is what I'm doing has a bigger effect than I thought. Not to say I'm amazing. It's just to say,
you are amazing,
I'm doing the right thing. There you go.
Well, you're amazing.
The word amazing is not complete without Maz.
Maz. I think you have a shirt that says I guess, would you say amazing? No. I guess that's
amazing.
How you say it. Amazing.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah.
Part of your merch collection. Let's talk about the fact that when you think of work ethic and drive and compassion and kindness, all to be wrapped up in the, success bucket for people who want to make it be it entertainment, do whatever they want to do with their lives. I'd be blissed by not asking you where your cultural identity played in all of that. So being that you came to the United States as a 6-year-old with immigrant parents from Iran, has that allowed you to differentiate yourself as a comedian too, and then use that not to just your advantage, but hopefully to help people better understand that there are various types of comedians in the industry, various types of people in entertainment?
Yeah, listen, when I first started, I took a stand-up comedy class, and a lot of comedians, I say just go do open mics, but I'm somebody who does well under classes just because there's deadlines. I do well with deadlines. So um, one of the things they taught us in that class, they said talk about what differentiates you from everybody else.
Yeah.
So they would go around the class and somebody would say, and they had these phrases you had to complete. The phrase was, because they said the person who started the class, her name is Judy Carter, and she would say, every comedian is saying one of these phrases. There was like 5 phrases, and it was like, it is hard when fill in the blanks. I love it when fill in the blanks. It's crazy when. So you have to have an opinion. That's what every comedian, you have an opinion.
Yeah.
So going around the class, they go, for you, like say, it's hard when, I don't know, it's hard being a guy. That's okay, but that's not good enough because there's a bunch of guys here. It's hard being an immigrant. Get more specific. Hard being Iranian American. Okay, hard growing up Iranian in America. So then it was like, write a bunch of jokes about that. So that differentiated me at the beginning. But what I really quickly learned was we have so many observations and experiences in common. We all experience heartbreak. We all want to be loved. We all want to have some kind of level of success. We all get pissed off when telemarketers call you, or whatever it is.
I love it. No.
You love it. Yeah, exactly. So the point being that, like, I'm not going to do hours and hours of just like Iranian this, Iranian that, Iranian this, because at a certain point, I'm really pigeonholing myself. So I realized that's when I started saying immigrant this, immigrant that. That's when I realized that, a lot of immigrants have things in common. And if you're not an immigrant, you have friends that have been immigrants. And even if you're not, like some of the jokes I used to do a joke about how my grandmother used to hide her cash in her bra. And I said, that's where she kept her cash. And I said, we used to think she was a D cup till one day we went to buy a house and she pulled out the cash. We realized she's an A cup. And then we looked closer and we realized she was grandpa. So that's the joke, right?
Yeah.
But I did that one time at the Laugh Factory in LA, and there was a couple of Latina girls that were falling out of their chairs laughing. And I go, oh my God, Mexican grandmothers put their money in their bras. Yeah. Then I've had people say, like, my Southern grandmother puts her money in her bra. So you realize, oh, I got to talk about me. Joke. I don't have to worry. Grandma joke. And so I have talked about and will often lean into the Persian thing, but I've also tried to lean away from it. I really don't like when people go Iranian comedian. I go, God, I that's not who I am. I'm a comedian who happens to be Iranian. Because if you come to my shows, I've had Iranians come, because what I end up getting sometimes, I get Iranians that are like new to America who don't even speak English that well. They've come to my show thinking I'm going to do a whole show in Persian, and they'll come up afterwards and be like, why no jokes in Persian? I go, because the audience had people from different backgrounds.
From everywhere.
Or I've had people come up and go, you should do more jokes about your Persian mom. And I'm like, I'm not a jukebox. I'm talking about what I want to talk about.
Yeah.
So, it's a little bit of both.
Oh man. Well, more on that too. So between you and I'm not a reader, but I have been trying to read a lot before bed. And the second I saw that you had written a book, I was like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and buy that. It's going to be next on the list. And it's entitled, I'm Not a Terrorist, but I've played one on TV, Memoirs of a Middle Eastern Funny Man. What inspired you to write the book? What can someone like me who's about to newly pick it up expect out of it? And then most importantly, Maz, what did you really hope readers would get out of it?
Well, you're going to be happy. It's going to be easy read because it's all cartoons.
Good.
So you're good.
Come on. That's an easy one. Good.
5 pages, cartoons, you're done.
No, stop. There's no way.
No, I basically, the truth is, my manager, his name is Ray Mohit. he is like a younger brother to me. He was actually good friends with my brother. That's how I met him. Years ago, as I was touring, Ray says, have you thought about writing a book? And I go, not really, I'm busy touring. And he goes, I think you got a book in you. So he sets
Hmm.
up some meetings. We go back and forth. We meet an editor, Simon and Schuster. And in our conversations, we realized, okay, so what I've done is at that time, and before the pandemic, I was
Yep.
literally, stand-up comedy is now a worldwide phenomenon. It's no longer, it used to be like in the 80s or whatever, it was, you could, if you were touring, you tour around the country. You do Cleveland, you do Kansas City, New York, yada, yada. Now you do like Melbourne, Australia, you
Hmm.
do, Norway, I've done Indonesia, I've done Jakarta, I've done the Middle East, I've been all over the world. And so we thought, hey, why not do a book that talks about these travels, take each chapter I'm sorry, some of the major cities
Yeah.
and use those as the launching pad of that story. So for example, the first chapter is called Dallas, and it's all about, it goes back and forth. It's kind of me growing up in America, but it's also me traveling the world.
Hmm.
So the Dallas chapter is all about how when I first came to America as a 6-year-old, my parents didn't know back then. Like now, parents know, oh, we should read about this show to see if it's appropriate for kids.
Hmm.
Back then, they weren't reading shit. They were just like, watch it. So like when I was 8 years old, I'm watching The Exorcist at the house. So similarly, the show Dallas, which was a very racy soap opera thing, my mom and my aunts would watch it and we'd be sitting there watching it with them. I just remember like how much they loved the show Dallas, and how in
Hmm.
my mind this was some glamorous place with the Ewing family, and like, I had this image. It's kind of like America. You think, oh my
Yeah.
God, America is an amazing place. And then like you realize, oh wait, there's a lot of racism in Texas, or there's people with guns that'll shoot you, There's a lot of good people in Texas too.
Yeah.
But you, as a kid, you just imagine something else. Well, that was like the launching pad of that chapter, was my image of what Dallas was going to be. And then I go to Dallas years later
Hmm.
to be in a Chuck Norris movie. And I tell the story of how Dallas was not at all what I thought it was going to be, because here I am playing in a Chuck Norris movie with a turban on. And I'm like, this is not what I thought it was going to be. So each chapter has a story. It's pretty easy to read because you learn about those cities, you learn about the touring, you learn about me. And we tried to do it with a sense of humor.
Hmm.
So I think I did a pretty decent job. So hopefully you'll enjoy it.
I will enjoy it, and I hope everybody
Yeah.
else who's listening and watching enjoys it too, Maz. You bring up this idea that you've traveled the world, someone like me who's an Air Force brat, a proud Air Force brat at that, a Japanese American one, who we've had the experiences, whether you're touring or whether I was forced to do it with the military, getting the experience and exposure around all different types of life, how that really played into your success and where you see yourself now, and how you interact with people, how you engage with certain communities, how you are able to speak to different audiences. You mentioned people from Iran would come into your comedy clubs, yet you were having to cater to all types of people. But I'd assume it's because you knew the majority of all types of people and how they were, at least for the most part. And that had to have come from traveling as much as you did and seeing as many people as you did. So if you had to give us some of your thoughts in terms of why do you think it is in most of people's, or why would you think it's in everyone's best interest to really diversify the amount of people and the kinds of people that you put yourself around from a cultural perspective?
Look, I mean, first of all, I think stand-up comedy has been good to me in that when you perform at the clubs, you're going to run into all kinds of people. You're going to run into
Mm,
conservatives, liberals. You're going to run into Europeans, Americans, Africans. People are visiting and they come to the club. So you get to perform in front of all kinds of people. You realize a lot of us around the world have a lot of things in common. We all just want to, make enough money to feed ourselves and our family. If we have extra money, we want to go see a movie or something, right?
yeah.
So in 2007, I was part of the Axis of Evil comedy tour, which was a group of Middle Eastern American comedians touring. We were lucky enough to go to the Middle Eastern tour. It was the first time I'd gone to the Middle East since I'd left Iran years before.
Wow.
And so I went there and I realized, wow, the people of Egypt, Lebanon, United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Jordan, they're living their lives. You know, I think a lot of times in America, politicians will try to convince us that those people are out to kill us. I'm not saying we don't have detractors and enemies. I'm not saying that there are not people out there who go, oh, you know, I don't like America, or maybe they want to fight with America, whatever. But when you say they don't like us, the way most average Americans take it is they, all of them. They don't sit there and go, well, there's a small group of a terrorist group out of wherever that doesn't like us and might be trying to do acts of terror around the world. They take it as, no, those people of that country. That's how they see it. So when I go to places like those countries and I go, wait, no, most people are like, you know, you see these clips of people going, death to America, death to America. And I go, that's a TV crew went there, got a group of people who was either chanting or had just been riled up and is showing it to us. And we're like, they want death to us. And I go, no, man, America ain't that hot. People aren't waking up every day going, I want to go chant death to America. People in those countries are waking up going, I got to go to work, feed my family, and improve my life. Now, again, there's a small group that might go to that rally later and chant that. But then even that guy's going to go home and be like, what's for dinner?
Yeah.
You know? So all of that to say, it's easy to manipulate people towards hate. Very easy. Very easy to blame other people. It's the Mexicans' fault. It's the Muslims' fault. It's the, you know, Hondurans' fault. It's whoever is at fault. Black people's fault. It's the other. It's the enemy. And I go, number one, I would encourage you to reach out to people in those communities. Go to their restaurant, maybe. When Black Lives Matter happened, I was on a chat with some of my friends that are very conservative, that are Iranian Americans, and they were saying, I don't understand this Black Lives Matter. What's going on? You know, Black people have had opportunity. How about all lives matter? And I would say, guys, have you talked to any of your Black friends about their experiences in America? And one of them was like, well, there's a Black guy I play tennis with. You know, when I asked him, yeah, when he came into my neighborhood, he did get pulled over sometimes. I go, yeah, dude. Yeah. So this shit's happening. It's not happening to you, but it's happening to them. So open the conversation. Try to be sympathetic. Try to break bread with people. I wish people in America traveled more. You know, we don't travel as much, but I wish they traveled more. I really do feel that the more you see the world, you realize, listen, man, there's good people all over the world and there's assholes all over the world. Yeah. So there's probably a lot of a-holes that are citizens that claim to love America. I mean, the guys that just arrested who were going to kidnap the governor of Michigan. I mean, there's a bunch of assholes right there. Yeah. And they're Americans. They're red-blooded American. God damn it, my right not to wear a mask. Really, dude? Really, you're going to go and train and go kidnap the governor of Michigan? Like, you know, there's a mental illness going on there. Right. So I would hope people don't go down that hole, and I would hope that people would reach out their hands and, you know, try to meet somebody that you think is your enemy, and you'll quickly realize that they're not.
Yeah. Have you found too that it made you a more confident human overall when you started? I mean, we're talking years of you building this incredible life for yourself with your family and loved ones, but over time, I'm assuming, I mean, I'm 24 saying this, but I would think that when you're allowing yourself to break bread with as many people as you can and understand all types of cultures and, you know, people from all different kinds of backgrounds, and doing that to however many people as you can in your lifestyle, has it made you more confident in terms of owning your authentic identity?
Yeah, I think confidence comes with getting out there, putting yourself out there, and maybe getting burned a few times and realizing it doesn't hurt that much. Especially in this world of social media, you'll say something and someone will come back at you and try to belittle your opinion.
Yeah.
And my thought is, dude, I'm 48 years old. I have a mortgage. I'm educated. I've traveled around the world. Who are you to tell me stick to comedy?
Yeah.
What do you mean stick to comedy? I'm a multifaceted person. I'm going to be political. I'm going to be, silly. I'm going to be parental. I'm going to have all of these aspects of myself. So if I go on my social media, by the way, my social media page, and I post something, for you to come on there and say, stick to comedy, I go, you stick to whatever the hell it is you do, or go create your own channel, go create your own career, and do your thing. But so that confidence comes from, you know, again, coming from these backgrounds that you and I come from, respect your elders, discipline, all that
Mm.
stuff is very, very important. So I think the difference between these immigrant cultures and the American culture is we're taught early on, respect your elders, they know better than you. The American culture says, question your elders, they don't know shit. So somewhere in between, it took me a while to finally get around and go, wait a minute, I could be disrespectful to my elders. Not that I want to be,
Mm.
but if there's somebody who's spewing something at me that doesn't make sense, I need to stand up for myself, whether they're older than me or younger than me. Um, so I think expressing your opinions, finding your truth. I know who I am. So when I come out and I make fun of Trump, or I do tweets and on social media that are against Trump and
Mm.
for Biden or whatever, I have people in my own community. There's a lot of immigrants that like Trump, and they'll
Mm.
come at me. And I'm going, dude, I'm pretty set in my ways. I see the world the way I see the world. Your little link to your article is not going to change my mind.
Right.
And you don't have to stay with me. I don't need you on my page.
Yeah.
Go find somebody else, you know? And by the way, here we are doing this Zoom, and it's going to live on social media, but God, it's nice to just be off your phone sometimes. And I'm not just saying that for me. I'm saying that for that guy who feels that by screaming something to my post about Trump, that now I'm going to engage, we're going to get into an argument. And then all of a sudden we're arguing. He doesn't really know me. I don't really
Mm.
know him. And now I'm down this rabbit hole of an argument about something I'm trying to convince him. He's trying to convince me. Meanwhile, I've got a beautiful day outside. I've got a puppy now. I've got my family.
Mm.
I can go be taking a nap. That's healthier than being in that world. So be confident,
Yeah.
and also disengage sometimes. You don't need to, be reeled in with everybody and they're, them trying to tell you who to be.
Mm. And with disengagement comes disconnecting. How do you disconnect?
Oof.
Is it literally taking this thing and throwing it against the couch and saying, you know what, screw it. Everything that's on that can wait until after I'm
I've
done.
seen this. It's really a dangerous thing because I'm guilty of it. In the morning, I get up, I'm like, what's going on? I check it.
Yep.
I really want to get away from that. I watched this documentary, The Social Dilemma on
Dilemma.
Netflix.
Same.
That was a good one.
It was a great one.
And I realized also recently, so we were with my daughter, she's 9,
Yep.
and my wife's phone was ringing. I think it was on silent, but it was ringing, and my daughter saw it. She's like, or is it ringing, or a text came in? My daughter was like, oh, whatever. Hey, mommy, Jennifer texted you, or whatever it was. And we were eating and talking and in the other room. And I told my daughter, I go, hey, Mila, you don't have to, let me straighten this out a little bit.
Oh,
I
yeah.
said, you don't have to respond. It's Pavlovian. It's become like a Pavlov's dog in many ways. I said, you didn't got to respond. I said, as a matter of fact, I go, when I'm with somebody, I try to put the phone face down so I don't even get a chance to see it. And it is one of the best feelings is being away from it for a while, especially during this pandemic. I'm telling you,
Yeah.
my friends who were conservative before have gotten even more conservative. Some
Yep.
of them have gone into this world of QAnon. And I honestly feel like I've lost some friends to conspiracy
Sure.
theories.
Sure.
And so sometimes those friends are on this chain, this WhatsApp chain with me. And sometimes they'll post something that I'll ignore. But sometimes they post something that angers me. So I get into it. And so there's been times when I put the phone away and I come back and there's like 35 texts between them. And I'm like, wow, I'm so happy that I
That
was
you
not in the middle of that. And now I'm going to review it and I'll decide if I want to answer or not. But it's so
Yeah.
nice to
Wow.
get away from it. So sometimes just putting that damn phone down and walking away being out of the house. There's been times where like, we'll be like, you're going out, you're not taking the phone. I'm like, no. And it feels good to not have it. There's been times I've lost my phone for like
Yeah.
a day or two. Like it takes a day or two for Apple to send you the new phone. So I've just sent some emails to like my manager, agent, my family. I said, if you need to reach me, email me.
Yeah.
And it's been so nice, dude. So nice.
Can that just be the trick right there? Just lose the phone unintentionally or intentionally, and then use your email to connect. I just remember back in the day when MySpace was still a thing. That's how we used to connect with people if you wanted to engage, or you pick up the little home phone if your brother or family members weren't on it the same line.
Yeah.
And when you have the opportunity, you would quickly dial someone and stay on for a few hours and then be okay not talking to them for weeks. And now it's just so immediate.
You just gave me an idea for an app, because it's always some crazy idea for apps, but like there should be an app where they turn off your phone, or they help you lose your phone, but while keeping track of it. It's almost like, when you go to the shows, you got to put your phone in a Ziploc.
Exactly.
There should be an app where you put your phone away and you can save in like 4 hours, 2 hours, whatever it is. And it's just gone. Like you got nothing. And then just you live. I mean, that's not, I don't know if there's a business model there.
Yeah, I was going to say, maybe that'd be before the app. I think the app would then have to be installed into the phone that would be able to teleport itself away from us. But you're onto something, Maz. Yeah. And if Maz Jobrani and Justin Crawford can create an app, we're going to say it started right here on this podcast. Right. So let's take that business intelligence and move it along forward. I mean, you bring up your daughter and the fact that she also is, I mean, she's only 9 and she's already as engaged as we are with our cell phones. And so I wanted to ask you here too, if there was a lesson you are leaving with your kids, or one major lesson you would like to leave with your kids, at least right now, or rather, let me re-ask this. If there's one major lesson you've already given to your kids about the digital era and the social media world we live in right now, what is that?
It's so tough right now because they're on Zoom all day. So it's really hard because then they get off Zoom and now they want to play with their friends. So my daughter's doing dance contests with her friends, and then my son's doing Dungeons and Dragons, and then they're watching a TV show. So screens are a big part of their lives right now. And if it weren't for their lockdown, it would be a lot less. I've tried with the digital stuff. I've tried as much as I can to instill in them this idea that don't be a slave to the device. And I've told them about addiction and how addiction works. And there's been times when my son's not a big gamer, but there's been times when he's asked permission to play some video game. And I've said, all right, go do 20 minutes. And then 20 minutes come along and he goes, I just need 5 more minutes to finish. I go, hey buddy, that's the phone controlling you. I go, what happens if you walk away from that? The world doesn't end. So I've tried to instill that idea of remember that you control the device shouldn't control you.
Yeah. And that goes for everybody, your kids and everybody who has a device. There's a weird relationship I think we have with devices, and that's phones, that's laptops, that's refreshing your apps, that's clicking on the app 17 million times a day. And I just wonder where that's going to go. So I'm glad you bring up Social Dilemma. I also watched that, and I keep thinking, you know what? Instagram for guys like you and I is almost a business tool. And so it's a little bit of a different POV I think we have on it, but then you're watching your family and our friends and our loved ones use it in the way of almost entertainment relief. And people are just scrolling and refreshing nonstop. And I'm thinking, damn, what's this going to lead to? But again, you can't tell until we get out of these pandemics and, get back to more in-person experiences where it's not so forced that an IG live is how we have to kind of entertain ourselves instead of going to a comedy club for now.
Even like news, like I love reading the news, and the fact that it's so available. I can go to New York Times, app, the Washington Post app, whatever website I want to go to. And new articles are coming up. Geez, sometimes it's good to disengage from that and have the whole day go by. Like there's times in the evening when I'll turn to my wife, I go, I didn't follow the news today. What happened? And it's kind of nice to watch it in real time, because the fact is, I'm not a policy maker. I don't necessarily need to know every second when something comes out. Right. So yeah, it's the 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 availability of it is the danger of it. You
Hmm.
know, it's right there. It's right there. It is. It's like being a drug dealer and you've got crack sitting right there. And I mean, I'm sorry, being a drug addict and having crack right there. It's right there.
Terrible.
So why not pick it up and see what happens when I take some?
Well, if I thought this cell phone was like crack, Maz, I would say we're not fucking doing it. So, you know what? Let's put it down for just a second. Let's tie the knot on such an incredible conversation you and I've had this entire time. Thank you, first of all, for not only being today's man of the hour, but for being so candid with us as we discussed your life, your career, and then ultimately your family, and how these habits in today's time are really kind of shaping the future of what life might even look like after the pandemics too. And so my last question for you on today's Man of the Hour podcast, when you think of this life that you've lived in the United States, from the time that you were 6 all the way to right now, where you're living in the West Coast with your family, your beautiful family, doing what you love, even if it's virtual, it's, you've built an incredible empire under your comedic career. And then that's led to so many other opportunities, such as TV shows and podcasts and speaking engagements. What would you look back and tell your younger self that might have been a little afraid that this would have been where you are now?
I would have told my younger self to go for it earlier. I never have regrets because your life is the way it should be. So if I had, at the age of 17, I almost went to New York to go to New York University just as a student and was hoping to maybe make my way into the acting department.
Huh.
But because I grew up on the West Coast and my parents weren't encouraging it, I didn't do it. Now, in that interim, I had amazing experiences. I made some amazing friends. I went to UC Berkeley. I got to study abroad in Italy. My friend who introduced me to my wife, I met him
Hmm.
at Berkeley. So
Yep.
my life would have been completely different. But I would tell that younger guy at that younger age, whether it was when I tried at 17 or 22 or 23, I would tell him, or I would tell any kid at a younger age, if you've got a passion, just go for it. I mean, Nike said it best, just do it.
Yep.
Because we put things off. There was a gentleman by the name of Joe Ryan who was in his 60s when I was in my mid-20s working at an advertising agency, and I was just an assistant, and I was doing plays just as a hobby, and I hadn't decided to do this as a career yet. And Joe saw some footage of me doing the play and getting laughs, and he goes, "Hey, you're good at this. Have you ever thought about doing this professionally?" And I said, Joe, I'm 26 right now, and I'm going to save up some money, and maybe in my 30s, I'll give it a try.
Hmm.
And he said, listen, he said at the time, he goes, I'm in my 60s at this point. And he goes, when I was in my 20s, there was a lot of things I wanted to do. I just kept putting it off and I never got to it. So he goes, if you really want to do it, you got to do it. So that was Joe Ryan. And that was one of my light bulb moments. So
There
if
you
I
go.
could talk to the younger self, and if I could talk to younger people, if you've got a drive, you're passionate, and it's not just some crazy pipe dream that obviously, I'm not saying like, oh, if you're sitting at home and you have zero experience and zero talent in some profession, I'm not saying just leave your home and go try it. Obviously, to take the right steps. But if you have that passion, go for it. Don't wait.
Go for it. Don't wait. I wish I could just cut the podcast episode right there. But I
Yeah.
can't end this podcast without plugging yours, my friend. Back to School with Maz Jobrani. It's available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, probably where people are tuning into this one. And you also have some content that's being released across digital platforms as well. And so, I mean, what inspired that? And then Turnfold. And, you guys are so many episodes into the show. I was listening to a couple episodes myself, and you're bringing experts from all walks of life onto this to educate people about everything,
Yeah, back to school came about because my son, when he was a little bit younger, anyone who's got kids knows your kids ask you all kinds of questions and you
Questions.
realize how dumb you are. So they would ask me questions, how does this work? How does that work? I was like, I don't know. So I said, you know what, let me open it up, and I'm going to because I have a lot of interests. I'm interested in politics. I'm interested in psychology. I'm interested in parenting. There's a lot of interests that I have. So I've found people that have stories and I bring them on. One of my good friends, his name is John Buscemi. He's a shoe entrepreneur. He started a shoe company, brought him on. Reza Aslan is an expert on religion, brought him on. You name it. I just brought on an FBI former assistant director of FBI counterintelligence, Frank Figluzzi. He came on. So these people come on, they talk about specific subjects, and it's about an hour-long conversation with these people. And my hope is when people listen to my podcast, they either get inspired or they learn something new. And it's kind of like being in college and getting a chance to take classes.
Yeah.
We're still in general education. You can take any class you want. So, I don't discriminate in terms of who I bring on to teach us.
Oh, man. Well, after everybody gets done listening to this podcast, after Maz Jobrani has inspired you with his life surrounding, since the time he immigrated to the United States and then beyond to create such an incredible career around comedy and so much more in the entertainment business, be sure to check out Back to School with Maz Jobrani on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. I want to thank you so much for being today's man of the hour. Again, I've looked up to you for quite some time. I'm no comic myself, but if I did step into comedy, you'd be one of the first people I went to go look at because of the stories you're able to tell authentically, not only from your experiences, but having understood so many other people's experiences. And so again, that's why we were so excited to have you on this show, and we will be sure to stay in touch to hopefully do this in person one day, should it not be virtual, but I'm glad we were able to meet you under some virtual circumstances now.
Thank you, Justin. I appreciate you. And if I were in front of you right now, I'd put my hands to the sides and just bow. Just bow.
Arigato gozaimasu. Hi. Thank you. Hi. Arigato
gozaimasu.
Justin Crawford here, and I'll be back next week with another great guest on the Men of the Hour podcast. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review right here and anywhere else you'd like to listen. Also, check out our Instagram and YouTube channels when you get a chance and see the full video interviews with our guests at Men of the Hour podcast. Thanks for listening. Now get out there and make a positive change for yourself and those around you.